At first glance, nothing dramatic has happened. No cheating, no betrayal, no explosive confrontation. And yet, something is breaking. Quietly, slowly, almost invisibly. Because in Salem right now, a silent war is unfolding. And it isn't being fought with words or actions. It's being fought with control. At the center of that shift stands Sarah Horton. On one side, Xander Kyriakis, increasingly unsteady, increasingly reactive. On the other, Brady Black, wounded, restrained, and unexpectedly stable. This isn't a traditional love triangle. It's something far more dangerous. Because when relationships stop being about love, they become about who gets to matter. Let's start with Xander Kyriakis. On paper, Xander has nothing to stand on. He and Sarah are no longer together. He has no official role in her life, no emotional claim, no right to question her choices. And yet, emotionally, Xander doesn't feel finished. Not even close. When Xander learns that Brady is now living at the Kyriakis mansion, something shifts inside him immediately. But it isn't anger, and it isn't panic. It's displacement. That tight, unsettling feeling that comes when someone else quietly steps into a space you once occupied. Xander isn't reacting because he's deeply, hopelessly in love. He's reacting because he feels replaced. For a long time, Xander's sense of identity was tied to Sarah's presence in his life. He was her protector, someone she depended on, someone who mattered. That proximity gave Xander purpose. So when Brady begins orbiting Sarah's world, even without romantic intent, it threatens something deeper than jealousy. It threatens Xander's sense of relevance, and when identity feels threatened, behavior changes. That's why Xander's questions don't come across as casual curiosity. They feel territorial. Here's the uncomfortable truth Xander is forced to confront. He knows he doesn't have the right to feel this way, and that awareness makes the emotion far more dangerous. Jealousy with permission can be discussed. It can be negotiated. It can be acknowledged openly. But jealousy without permission? It has nowhere to go. Xander can't demand answers from Sarah. He can't set boundaries. He can't make claims or draw lines. So the emotion has no outlet. It turns inward. And emotions that turn inward don't disappear. They intensify. They surface as fixation, as resentment, as quiet obsession. This isn't really about Brady. Brady is just the trigger. What Xander is reacting to is the loss of his emotional foothold. He's no longer the person Sarah turns to first, no longer the one she needs, no longer central to her decisions. Xander isn't fighting for Sarah. He's fighting against irrelevance. And that distinction is everything. Now let's talk about the person at the center of all this, Sarah Horton. Because while Xander feels the story slipping out of his hands, Sarah has already moved on, internally. And that internal shift is the most important development of all. Sarah doesn't argue with Xander. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't defend her choices. And she doesn't reassure him. Instead, she does something far more powerful. She stays calm. Sarah's calm isn't passive, it's deliberate. Without ever saying it out loud, Sarah makes one thing clear. She no longer explains her life to people who once hurt her. This isn't cruelty, and it isn't indifference. It's clarity. Sarah isn't choosing Brady. She's choosing autonomy. She's choosing to move forward without emotional negotiation, without justification, without seeking approval. And that choice destabilizes Xander more than any romantic rival ever could. Because autonomy removes leverage. It removes the emotional access Xander once had. And when someone realizes they no longer hold influence over a person they once mattered deeply to, the loss hits harder than rejection. To Xander, Sarah's calm doesn't register as maturity. It registers as dismissal. Not because Sarah is being cold or unkind, but because she has stopped responding emotionally in ways Xander recognizes. For a long time, emotional intensity was the language of their connection. Arguments, passion, reconciliation. Now, that intensity is gone. And for someone like Xander, calm feels unfamiliar, even threatening. Calm creates distance. Distance feels like loss, and loss triggers fear. That fear is what's driving Xander now. He isn't exploding. He isn't confronting Sarah openly. Instead, he watches. He listens more closely than he admits. He asks questions that sound casual, but carry weight. He fixates on small details: who Sarah spends time with, where she goes, what she doesn't say. This isn't growth, and it isn't regression. It's instability. Because unresolved fear doesn't disappear when emotions quiet down. It just goes underground. So where does Brady Black fit into this equation? This is the question viewers should really be asking. Is Brady actually a romantic threat? Or is he simply a mirror, reflecting back what Xander is afraid to face? Brady isn't chasing Sarah. He isn't inserting himself aggressively into her life. He isn't competing for attention. Brady is doing something far more unsettling. He's being consistent. He shows up when he says he will. He listens without interrogating. He offers support without conditions. Emotionally present, predictable, grounded. Brady is wounded, deeply so. But he's also stable. And for Sarah, stability doesn't feel boring. It feels safe. That doesn't make Brady the villain of this story. It makes him the contrast. And contrast is dangerous, because it exposes cracks that were already there. Xander doesn't fear Brady. He fears what Brady represents. To truly understand what's happening, we have to look at two versions of Xander. Xander then, loud, impulsive, reckless, desperate for validation. Xander now, quieter, more restrained, still insecure, still deeply afraid of being left behind. At first glance, this looks like growth. But the difference isn't emotional maturity. It's suppression. Xander hasn't resolved his fear of abandonment. He's learned how to mask it. He's learned when to stay quiet, when to pull back, when to pretend he's fine. But suppression isn't healing. And seeing Sarah build a life that no longer revolves around him pulls that fear straight back to the surface. This isn't Xander going backward. It's Xander being exposed. The parts of him that never healed are suddenly visible again. And that's what makes this phase so volatile. Let's be absolutely clear about what this story is and what it is not. This storyline is not about who Sarah loves. It's about who gets access to her emotional world. Love is emotional. Access is positional. And right now, that position is shifting. Xander wants reassurance. proof that he still matters, that he hasn't been erased from Sarah's life. Brady offers consistency, stability without pressure, presence without demand. Sarah wants independence, the freedom to exist without explaining herself to anyone. Those three desires cannot coexist peacefully. They pull in opposite directions. Someone will inevitably feel excluded. Someone will feel threatened. Someone will feel the urge to reclaim control. And Days of Our Lives thrives in exactly this kind of tension. Because when relationships stop being about affection and start being about access, they become about power. Who gets to ask personal questions? Who gets to define boundaries? Who is allowed to stay close? And who must step back? This isn't a romantic triangle. It's a power imbalance in motion. This is why this storyline is engineered to divide the audience. There is no clear villain, and that's intentional. Some viewers will argue, Xander is justified. He's hurt. He's reacting like a human being who feels replaced. Others will push back hard. Xander is crossing emotional boundaries. Sarah owes him nothing. Brady isn't doing anything wrong. Both sides will feel right. Because the conflict isn't moral, it's emotional. Xander hasn't exploded. Yet. Brady hasn't crossed a line. Yet. Sarah hasn't drawn a hard boundary. Yet. But the trajectory is unmistakable. Control is slipping. And when someone feels that loss deeply enough, especially someone like Xander, they don't stay passive forever. They act. Not always loudly, not always immediately, but decisively. And when that happens, the quiet war becomes impossible to ignore. Xander is losing control, but not because of Brady. Brady is only the catalyst. The real reason Xander is unraveling is simpler and far more painful. Sarah no longer centers her life around him. That's the shift. That's the threat. That's the loss he can't accept. And that's why Sarah is the most powerful person in this story. Not because she's manipulating anyone. Not because she's choosing one man over another. But because she's choosing herself. She's choosing autonomy over appeasement. Peace over emotional negotiation. Clarity over chaos. And in Salem, when someone makes that choice, it never stays quiet for long. So the real question isn't whether Xander will react. It's how far he'll go once he realizes he no longer has a place in Sarah's emotional center. And whether Sarah will be forced to choose between protecting her peace or confronting someone who doesn't yet know how to let go.